Oh, welcome back to Highlands. Postcards from the finish line from the beautiful Boston Marathon. My name is Bob Babbitt, and Highlands is involved with making sure that you stop the cramp and not your race. And we're also brought to you by Polar, their tagline, Chase Your Destiny. Our guest, 1968 Boston Marathon champion, Mr. Amby Burfoot. Amby, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Bob. It's wonderful to be back here, see you again, and see about 1 million other people.
Yeah, I bet this is a pretty busy week for you, huh?
It's a busy weekend, and you start worrying about whether you're going to have any energy left for the race on Monday, since I'm doing that also. But it's so exciting to come and see everyone and be part of the crowd.
For years, you would run every 5th year, I think. And then after the bombings of 2013, you've run now 14, 15, 16, and now 17.
My goal was always to get to 2018, which would be the 50th anniversary of my win in 68.
Yes.
So 2013 was one of those years. I was in the group stopped a mile from the finish line.
That's right.
Because I'm not so fast anymore. That's okay.
It is okay.
But after not finishing in 2013, I wanted to run in 2014, like everybody in the world wanted to run 2014. And after 2 in a row, I figured, what the heck?
Keep going.
Keep
right?
it rolling, man.
I love it. I love it. So back when you won this, was Billy Rodgers your roommate at that point?
Bill Rodgers was my roommate at that point.
At Wellesley.
At Wesleyan.
Wesleyan, I'm sorry.
And he was running in this little 2-bit intercollegiate track meet against UConn, where I was supposed to be there.
Yes.
But by then, everybody at Wesleyan had accepted the fact that I was going to blow off 2-bit track meets and come up here and give it my best at Boston. So that's what I did.
And had you been doing a lot of long training leading into that?
Yeah, I had run Boston in 65, 67, Catherine's year.
Right.
So this was my 3rd Boston. I was actually in very, very good shape in 67. I finished 17th. Spent 5 minutes in Porta-Johns along the way. That's a story we won't tell. But I was ready in 68, yeah.
And so when you went into that, you were thinking, I'm here for the win.
You know,
or at least to compete.
There were 2 things going on. In all honesty, 68 is an Olympic year. And
Yes.
as you know, that means a lot of the top Americans skip Boston to prime themselves for the Olympic marathon trials.
Right.
That was Alamosa in the summer. I'm like, hell, I'm from New England. My coach, John Kelly, is a Boston Marathon winner.
Legend, yeah.
I don't skip Boston for anything. I run Boston, and then I try and come back at the trials. So I trained for Boston. I was ready for Boston, and I have to say, for the one and only time in my life coming into this race, I was in that state of flow. Every single run I did for 2 weeks was effortless.
Really?
I've never got back there again. I don't know what happened in 68, but to have that click once in your life is a pretty great thing.
That is so cool. So it was just, did the day feel effortless as well?
The day was entirely effortless. The first 13 miles I just ran with the pack.
Yeah.
There were maybe a dozen of us, and I was jogging. I was at the front of the pack, I was jogging. I said to myself, well, let's do a little surge, and maybe we'll drop one person out of the dozen. I did a little surge. Everybody was gone, except for Bill Clark, who ended up being the guy that I dueled over the hills with.
When you're when you're coming down Boylston to win this race, and obviously with John Kelly as your coach when you're younger, and it's all the history, what did it mean to you?
I had so much history. Jock Semple was a fan because he was John Kelly's coach. That was the one year that old John Kelly missed with a hernia surgery. He was leaning out the back of the press bus and slapping the side saying, "Go, Amby," because I knew him. I cannot describe, I've never been able to describe the feeling of coming down Boylston and knowing that you're going to get to the finish line ahead of anyone else. I mean, it's beyond a dream. It's a fantasy. I was 21 years old. You know what?
Yes.
You know, 21-year-old doesn't deserve that in a way, but I had done the work and I had my day.
Did you ever feel, because back then the prize money was non-existent, correct?
Yeah, the prize money was a bowl of beef stew, and I'm a vegetarian, so that was great.
You got nothing, okay.
Yeah.
So eventually you end up at Runner's World.
Right.
And moving to Emmaus, Pennsylvania.
Right.
And when that magazine was just getting going, did you ever have a sense that it was going to become, that one, the sport was going to get huge, and this magazine was going to become the Bible of the sport?
Well, first I want to say, if you win the Boston Marathon, in my mind, if you never make a penny off of running for the rest of your life, that's still
You're good. You're good to go.
That's a pretty wonderful thing.
Yeah.
1968, none of us could conceive of anyone having a career in endurance sports.
Right.
I mean, there were no shoe companies that were making money. There was no magazine that was making. There were no bars and no gels and no radio and TV. Nothing. No sponsor for the race. So when things took off a little bit in the late 70s, and one of the businesses doing well was Runner's World. They were very much a West Coast publication. They said, hey, we should have one of those old-time grunty guys from the East Coast. So they called me up, and
yes.
How do you say no to an editorial position at Runner's World where you spend all your day immersed in running and writing about it and talking to fabulous people?
And at that point, what were you doing?
At that point, I was working as an editor for a very small educational publisher in New London, Connecticut, where I live. So I was an editorial, but I didn't have a journalism background.
Sure.
It was small-time editorial. Runner's World was pretty small-time then, but it was taking off fast in those Jim Fix, Bill Rodgers years.
Well, I was going to say, so 78 in Emmaus, and watching the business grow, and Joan Benoit changed everything. So 84, now you've got the whole women's movement of women in marathon. You were there really through all the formative years of running and seeing all the changes. When you look back, was the biggest changes more along the lines of more women in the sport? What do you look at as the biggest change?
Oh, listen, Bob. The biggest changes are women.
And women.
And a few old guys like me who are still going. Because
Right.
in the old days, there was no one but old John Kelly.
Right.
But the women's running revolution, the boom, is absolutely the biggest, best, and most appropriate thing to happen in this sport.
Did it surprise you?
Of course it surprised us, because women didn't run when I first ran. My first Boston Marathon, 1965,
Yes.
0 women in the field.
Right.
Next year, Bobby, and then Bobby and Catherine. So you can't say that you foresaw that which didn't exist. None of us knew it was coming. And it took quite a while, because it wasn't even Joni. It was after Oprah in 94 that women started
That's really
flooding
true.
in.
Yes. And then you get the way the women reshaped it is at an expo like this, where you and I would come to an expo, pick up our stuff, and be out of here in 30 seconds.
Right.
All of a sudden, these became shopping extravaganzas, and people were spending more and more time at the expos. Obviously, more dollars are being made. The whole sport was revolutionized.
Oh, it's totally changed. I mean, at the point where it is now, where women are 50% of the market and the demographic,
Yes.
whatever they are, or
It
more.
could be, so a lot of times it's 60, and in some
absolutely.
rock and roll events, it could be even 70. Yeah.
Absolutely. And my total knowledge of shopping is 0.
Me
I
too,
can't
yes.
I can't dress myself for a race without my wife checking me over. So yeah, it's changed things, and we make fun of it, I think, when we talk about the shopping side of it. But running has changed just as many women's lives, if not more, than
No
it
question.
has for men. It's opened doors, and it's not just to the 8 and 12-year-olds, but there are women runners who start in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s
Yes.
and discover something they never had. And it's just fantastic.
What I love is, a lot of times, I think the women have been the early adopters on supporting a charity, running
Right,
for a cause.
right.
And then they come and support a cause and realize, I like this. I
Right.
like the camaraderie. I like how I feel about myself. I'm going to get my friends.
Well, let's face it, at its best, running is a social sport.
Right.
And you do go out for an easy training run at a conversational pace with your buddies. And women have more buddies than we do.
Way more.
That's the
Because
way they
they're
do
nicer
it.
people.
Yeah, they're nicer people. They support each other. They hang out together. So it's really the perfect sport for them, because 1 in a million is trying to be Joan Benoit, and that's appropriate. The other 999,000 are trying to feel good,
Yes.
be fit, be healthy, set a good example for their sons and daughters and husbands. And women are fantastic at all of that.
So, as a roommate and friend of Bill Rodgers, were you surprised that he became Boston Billy and became this amazing, legendary runner?
Again, as with the women question, I have to say yes.
Yeah.
I could lie to you and say, no, I knew it all the time. And I knew Bill had talent.
Right.
And I ran with him a lot. But when we were together and roommates in college, I was the focus guy. I was the anal retentive guy who followed my schedule. And he was kind of a loose-hearted party guy who went out on the weekends. And it wasn't until 3 or 4 years later that he really got focused and put in the energy and determination that the Bill Rodgers talent rose to the top.
So what is it about this event that obviously brings you back every year as a former champion, but today, it gets harder and harder to do this type of stuff. To go 26 miles is still a long way. It seems like it gets longer every day.
I'm glad you noticed that it's getting harder, because I sure as heck have.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's taking longer to get to the finish line too.
I keep going. Why does it seem that the hills are longer? Everything just seems to take more time. What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. I've never been healthier in my running life than the last year. I haven't had a pain in my body for a year. I'm enjoying every mile, but it's getting slower every step of the way. To answer your question, it's the history, it's the tradition, it's the family reunion, and of course, if you're lucky enough to call yourself a former Boston winner,
right,
you come up here and you get treated pretty nicely by people, you get remembered by some. And this year, let's mention, we have the premiere of the Boston Marathon movie.
Tonight, I'm so excited. I got to see it, yes.
We're all excited about it tonight.
You were a huge part of that movie.
I understand that Bill and I are a part of the movie, but I haven't seen a frame of it, so it'll come fresh to me.
I saw John brought it to L.A. to show us about 3-4 months ago.
Excellent.
And Amby Burfoot is a huge star in this movie. It's really, really cool. So Manchester Road Race?
54 in a row.
54 in a row!
And going. And I think this weekend I find out whether I got accepted into Dipsy, which is my life race for now. I got to go run Dipsy.
You've never done Dipsy?
I got in the 100th because they were nice to me, and then I got injured and I couldn't do it. But this year I think I'm ready, so I'm hoping they look nicely upon my entry again.
So what do you...
I bribed them a little bit.
Bribing is good.
Yeah.
Now what do you do for Runner's World now?
I'm a contributing writer. I've been retired for almost 4 years now. It's hard to believe. Do a lot of online stuff. I'm interested in the medical and health issues and the training side of running. And I write a couple of features a year. I've got a big feature coming up in a couple of months about the fact that so many people still think that running breaks down your knees and your hips and your back and puts you in a wheelchair, and the exact opposite is true, and there are plenty of scientific studies to show that. So it's not just good for your heart, it's actually good for the entire body.
It really is, and it's funny.
And the brain is the thing we never used to think about, and now it's everywhere.
What's interesting when you talk about that, every year at the Ironman, they have a medical conference, and they always pick a topic. And a number of years ago, they picked bone density for men and women.
Yeah.
And the men and obviously most of our guys started out as runners, and the bone density for men was off the charts. For a lot of the women, though, it wasn't.
Right.
And they had some issues. So what I've seen is a lot of people who run are starting to incorporate more of the swimming and cycling and things like that in. So you're using your engine, but maybe not running as much as when you're younger.
Well, when you age, you have no choice. I mean, come on.
Orthopedic reality.
Oh, yeah.
Every runner needs to become a cyclist.
Exactly. I'm totally healthy running, but I'm strength training, which I never did before. It does not show. I said to Ryan Hall, what gives? He said, you got to eat 7,000 calories a day. I said,
No.
I'm not going there. Not going there, Ryan. You can have them. But I'm an addicted exerciser on the days when I don't run, and I run just 3 or 4 days a week now.
See, that's perfect.
I'm on the bicycle. I don't go outside like you because I think it's dangerous.
It is dangerous, yes.
But I'm on a recumbent bicycle reading scientific papers and burning a few calories and enjoying the heck out of it.
I love that. You've come to the dark side.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shaving the legs?
Someday I'll learn to swim. That's next.
I love
That's on the life list.
Amby, thanks for being so generous with your time, and a lot of this stuff doesn't happen without people who believed in the sport back in the day, and you believed in the sport back in the day. So thank you for everything you've done to make running great.
Well, thank you, Bob. It's great to see you. Be here again. I didn't know you were running every year.
Elvis, baby.
So I'll look for you out there.
Black Elvis outfit.
Okay.
I'm towards the back of the pack.
Yeah.
Slow.
Okay.
But it's still fun.
That's good. That's the place to be, and having fun is what it's about.
Love it. Amby Burfoot has been our guest, 1968 Boston Marathon champion. And what number will this be for you?
About 23.
About 23, not quite sure. Hold on, everybody. We will be right back.